structures, including menthol and morphine. Students will apply the theory of and interpret C13 NMR, IR, and X-ray spectra in the context of structure determination. Students will write engagingly on a scientific topic clearly, concisely, and accurately. And students will gain preparation for remote internships or research experiences by developing various skills. So this is what I gave them, and then here's what they came up with. So all of the highlighted stuff is things that they added themselves. And I think it's way, way improved. So the first one is the same. So the second one just has an addition: students will practice problem solving by applying the theory of and interpreting spectra. And I just really like that. It's kind of clarifying what the purpose of doing all this is, right? It's practicing problem solving. For the third one, students will write engagingly with many opportunities for practice. I like this because it kind of shows that writing doesn't just happen. It's a process that you work towards. And also students will read and analyze scientific literature, which was always kind of one of the goals of this, sub-goals maybe, but I really like that it's explicit now and it's something the students actually care about doing. The skills one is unchanged, but then they added 2 new ones. This fifth one I really love. Students will gain confidence in their ability to execute the scientific process, both individually and as part of a team. There's so much going on here, right? Gaining confidence, executing the scientific process, which like doing science, which I feel like lab is all about. So I don't even know how this wasn't in there originally. And then working together with each other, but also being able to work independently. And then students will learn to embrace failure as an essential part of the learning and research process. I love that they added this because, right, failure is part of learning. You kind of have to learn what doesn't work to learn what does work. And it's basically most of research, right? 99% of research is failing. And then the last one, students will apply lecture content to lab experiments and vice versa. This was actually originally one. I'm not sure when it ended up getting cut out, but I'm really glad it got added back in. And then students will consider the interdisciplinary applications of their studies and the ways organic chemistry impacts their daily lives. So I really like that they're kind of thinking about how this course matters in their own lives and the rest of their studies. So I could not be happier with how these turned out. I think they much improved them. And also it gave me ideas for how to kind of, right at the very beginning, how to improve the course and target it in ways that they really wanted. So I added in extra writing assignment activities, right, that we actually do together to practice writing, and included more of like scientific literature analysis in those activities, more problem solving together in the lab meetings, things like that. So I think it really helped me. Also, I think it helped them understand what the goals are. I think if I'd given a quiz on the first, like the original ones, after showing it to them, they probably would have gotten 1. But I think now that they actually contributed themselves and they got to see, you know, the new ones, I feel like they have a much better idea of what they're actually supposed to be getting out of the course, and a better idea of what they personally want to get out of it. Another thing I did on the very first day was, this format's all new to everybody, like lab over Zoom, like it feels like a contradiction. How does that even work? So I had them do this little activity. This is called a Padlet. Basically, they can all just post little messages on it. And so the idea was that we would kind of set the classroom values together, and that they would all contribute to what they wanted the environment of the Zoom meetings to be like. So I had everybody post one thing that they hoped for themselves and for the other people in the class that they would practice kind of during the live meetings. So they all posted these, like they came up with these themselves. And I really love what they came up with, right? Like support, helping each other and collaborating, encouragement, including like the specific suggestion of using reaction icons, having fun, curiosity, right? All these things. And then, so after we did this little thing, I think I gave them, 5 minutes to post something. We had a discussion about it where each person had to pick one that wasn't theirs and explain what they liked about it. And they took this way deeper than I expected. Like some were pointing to others where they said, well, I have trouble speaking up because I feel like everyone here is so much smarter than me. And then everyone else would chime in, like, yeah, I feel the exact same way. And I really feel like it helped build that community right away of them all kind of realizing we're in this together, and kind of got ideas of, okay, well, maybe other people really will want me to like speak up with like the stupid question, right? And they'll support me, and it'll make it a space where we can actually do those things. So I thought this was a great exercise to do, and it didn't take that long. So just an idea of maybe doing something like this. We also talked about kind of specific nuts and bolts sorts of things, so rather than just like teamwork, right? Should we keep our cameras on? I said right at the very beginning, like, I'm not going to require cameras to be on. If you need to turn it off or you just want to turn it off, like, feel free. But they kind of talked about during this exercise how they enjoyed seeing each other and it helped them feel more like they're part of a community. And they probably 90% of them keep their cameras on the whole time, even though I've like never asked them for that, and frequently remind them that they don't have to, which is really nice. And things like, you know, mute yourself when you're not talking so that you don't have noise talking over other people. Another one that we talked about really specifically was whether or not to record. I went to a CTL event in the spring when we first went remote, and it was about discussion-based classes, which lab very much is, because it's pretty much all working through the experiments together. There's not a lot of just me talking. And so we kind of talked about the pros and cons of recording, right? Like, if you record it, then people who can't be there or have weird time zones, or maybe just people who want to rewatch it, will have that opportunity to kind of see what happened in the class. But the cons could be that people might feel less comfortable speaking up. They may be less likely to ask the stupid question, or just feel comfortable in the class. So I left it up to them. I gave each section their own poll to decide, and they also talked about themselves, like how they felt before we took the poll, anyone who wanted to. But the poll itself was anonymous, and they all voted either yes or no opinion. So they all voted to record. I think it helped that a few students kind of shared about like why they would really appreciate having it recorded. I don't know what I would have done necessarily if there was like a split decision, but I think they did appreciate kind of like getting to choose for themselves. And I also think it gave them kind of more appreciation of each other that they all voted to record, like for the people who couldn't be there or couldn't always be there. So just a little bit about how we structured the course and how that's kind of helped with some of these, you know, student centering and community building aspects. We've set all of the meeting times to be on Mondays and Tuesdays. And part of this was that we found in the spring when we went remote, the people who had their lab meetings early in the week tended to start their experiments, you know, either before or during the lab meeting, where if they didn't have their lab meeting until the end of the week, they would wait until the end of the week to start it. And of course, it's always better to get an early start on things. So we decided to hold all of the lab meetings on Monday or Tuesday, and then just have everything due at the end of the week. So, oops. The meetings are optional, so that no one's required to come to them. They don't actually have to come to the lab meetings so these are like the synchronous meetings that we have on Mondays and Tuesdays. They can do the experiments either on their own or in a study group, or at the lab meeting, or some combination thereof. I don't think anyone is actually chosen to complete the labs independently, just because they're pretty challenging and definitely kind of designed to be worked on collaboratively. A lot of people, probably 90%, come to the actual meetings even though they're not required, and at least start on it there. And then maybe, anyone who doesn't come or who doesn't finish it at the lab meetings tends to work on their own in study groups to finish it. Another thing we did was that we had all work due on the same day, no matter what section you're in. And this was to make it easier for students who are in different sections to collaborate with each other or hold study groups, right? Because if you have one section where everything's due on Wednesday and another where everything's due on, Friday, they're probably not going to be at the same place at the same time. And I think that's been really helpful for students who have friends in other sections or time zones where they want to maybe work, maybe all the people in Asia want to work at a certain time, and then they can more easily do that with all the other people in that same time zone who may not be in the same section as them necessarily. Because there's so much collaboration going on and we really wanted to encourage that, we decided for the first time ever to introduce participation points, just to kind of give credit to people for actually engaging in the lab and helping each other out and participating. But at the same time, I didn't want to keep track of and try to grade all 140 students' participation. So we decided to have them assess themselves on how they've been doing with their participation and engagement. So I created these little engagement reflection worksheets. This is basically just a way to encourage and give credit to the people who are actively helping each other out and collaborating and participating. So what those look like, looks like this. We tell them that they should complete it in about 15 minutes. It's not something they should spend forever working on. And they do these every 3 weeks. So we just had our first set come in. So basically, I listed out all the various ways that I could think of that they could possibly participate in the class. So that's this first question, right? Coming to the lab meetings, they can get credit for that. Participating in the lab meetings, either by kind of unmuting and talking, or talking in breakout rooms, or using the chat. So those are all options. Going to open hours, either the TA or coming to my open hours. Another thing I did was at the very beginning of the semester, before our first lab meeting, I did a meet and greet where I would meet with small groups of students just to kind of like get to know them a little bit, let them get to know me, have them a chance to get their questions answered before the first meeting. So they could get credit for coming to that. Working on assignments in a study group, right? So this isn't even something I could assess, even if I wanted to, right? I don't know who's working in a study group and how they're participating in that, but they do. And then posting on Piazza. I'd be happy to talk more about Piazza if anyone's interested. It's basically a Sakai discussion forum, but it's been very, very popular so far in the lab, and I think it's been really successful. Students are constantly posting on it, like all the time. I'm getting emails that people are posting on it, and they're answering each other's questions, even like really hard, complex questions. They're writing better answers than I take the time to write in some cases. Like, it's really, really great. And they're not only talking about lab stuff too, they're talking about, oh, hey, where did you go to high school? Go Gophers or whatever. And so then there's just a list of kind of short answer questions to kind of help them think through specifically how they could be engaging and maybe participating better or improving their engagement. So the first question is, right, if you're coming to the meetings, which isn't required, again, do you feel like your contributions are improving the class? Could you speak up more, or do you need to maybe provide space for others to talk? And then if you join a study group, are you actually actively making contributions? Do you think the other members of the group are basically having a positive influence by you being there? Were you posting on Piazza, right? And if you were you kind of were you asking questions like, where do I find homework 1? Or were you writing those really detailed, useful posts to answer somebody else's question? And both are encouraged. Did you take part in modes of engagement or participation in this course that are not listed in question 1? So I wanted to leave space if there's other things that they're doing And I've gotten a few of these already, and a lot of them are FaceTiming each other to kind of like work through experiments together, which I hadn't really considered. Maybe I would count that as like being in a study group, but I think it's great that they're doing that. So I wanted to allow them like to give themselves credit for things like that. And then what, if anything, will you do to more fully engage in the next unit? So I just wanted to incorporate that reflection piece where they reflect on what they could improve. And then I just have a rubric so that they can kind of see maybe how they could assign points for things. And also the maximum number of points of this is 5. So I tried to highlight that they do not have to excel in every single category, right? Like I don't expect them to always be posting on Piazza and being in part of a study group and coming to the lab meetings every single time. Basically, these are all different avenues and they can choose the one that works best for them and maybe supplement with one other, right? So if they're coming to all the lab meetings and making good contributions and then posting on Piazza 3 or 4 times over 3 weeks, so like once a week, then that's full credit, right? There's lots of different ways to get full credit. Also, 5 points in the grand scheme of the lab isn't that much. So even if they decided, I'm just going to do everything on my own, completely disengage and just turn everything in, they could still do well, right? They don't have to do this. It's just a way to give credit to those who do decide to engage in it. Okay, at this point, I've been talking a lot and I would really love to hear the thoughts of all of you. So we could maybe take 15 minutes to kind of talk about the ideas that you all have or any questions you have about anything I mentioned. The kind of questions I would love to hear is how you all allow students to make choices about their learning in your courses, ways that you all encourage community building, and whether and I know some of you have done self-assessment or ungrading to much greater extents than what I'm doing. So I'd love to hear more about that. So I'm just going to stop sharing so we can talk for a little bit.
Dave, you have your hand up?
I do have my hand up, thank you. Thanks, Sadie, this is really cool. I like it a lot. As far as the community building this semester, so I'm teaching organic lab also. For me, it's second semester organic lab. It looks like this might be first semester organic lab that you have this fall. I have a lot of the same students I had last semester, so I have that, which is a plus. And this time, before the semester started, I emailed all the students in my section to say, would you guys like to be partnered up? And I recommend this person because I knew them all, so I could kind of know who would be a good buddy. And they're like super enthusiastic. So they have like assigned partners for the whole semester and they're loving. Go to our lab meeting, I talked for a little bit and then they're like, please, can we go to our breakout rooms now? And then like, they're all in breakout rooms and they have a great time. Even if they've already done the assignment, they're done. They just still want to hang out in their breakout rooms and just talk to each other a little bit. And so that's been going fantastic this semester for my group.
That's great, I love that. Yeah, I forgot to mention Piazza has a cool feature where you can sign up to look for partners for a study group. So you can put in like your time zone or like the topics you want to focus on or whatever, and then just send that out to the whole class, and then other people can like join your study group. But I like that. It's fortunate that you know them all already and can kind of match them up. That's really awesome.
I'm embarrassed to admit I didn't realize that Piazza was in Sakai. And I already knew I really liked it because that's exactly how my daughter made study friends, because she's living here and she's going to school at UW. And so now that I know that, thank you for sharing.
Can you talk a little bit more about Piazza? Because it sounds cool. And I'm willing to learn that one more piece of technology if I need to.
Yeah, so it integrates into Sakai, and it's basically a discussion forum, but I've never tried this Sakai discussion forum, but I've heard that it's better than that, or it has more features or something. One of the things I really liked about it was the option to search for study groups, because I knew that these students didn't necessarily know each other and would probably benefit from that, and it seems that they have. But basically they can post at any hour of the day, right? Anyone can respond. There's like an instructor answer section and a student answer section. So I can give my answer, or I can endorse student answers. So if a student answers something, I don't have to retype it all out. I can just endorse it, and then they'll know, oh yeah, that person got it right. And yeah, they've been posting all sorts of questions and answers on there, and stuff, like I said, that isn't even necessarily course related. It's just them talking to each other, which I appreciate.
Do you think it's something that, I mean, we're a third of the way into the semester, so could I put it in now and they would use it, do you think, or should I wait till next semester?
You could try it. If there aren't options right now for them to talk to each other easily, right? If you've already set up like Slack or something like that, it probably would be redundant. But if you don't have any way for them to communicate, then I think it would probably get used.
Okay, I might follow up with you.
I use the forum and they don't like it. It's really impersonal. So I do get questions from the really on the ball students, but it certainly hasn't turned into a conversation board. So maybe I need to switch to Piazza and hope that that'll, but I know I encourage my students to set up a group me, and they did that through the chat and they invited everybody. So at least they have that. They're on their phones doing a group me.
Kathleen, this is Nora. I was thinking about, starting something in the middle of the semester, and I guess I would ask you, what do you think they're hungry for? It might be, it's Piazza pizza.
Yeah.
Pizza. But what are they hungry for that they might want to, that would, kind of lure them in? Setting up that practice of self-reflection in the beginning was great, but what do you think would lure your students in, or what do you want them to be talking about?
Well, we have big classes. We have about 45 students in our general chemistry classes. And I feel like, I set up individual study groups for them to meet. We do problem solving in class, but I feel like they're getting to know maybe a few people, but I want them to really kind of engage with more students. And I think they're hungry for that as well. When we have office hours where students, just a bunch of students come, they're having a really fun time talking with each other and getting to know students they haven't seen before. So I think that could be a good way. Because I didn't set up any discussion thing in Sakai or GroupMe, or I was just overwhelmed by learning about 20 different things that I felt like I didn't know very well anyway. So I'm like, I'm not going to add something else. But that's one thing that I thought about at the beginning, and I just didn't have the capacity. So
one thing that we did do in Gen Chem, and I'll share because it's cute, just like Sadie, I loved how Sadie used her Padlet. I think that's such a neat thing. But we also in Gen Chem do have a Padlet, and we ask a question each week that isn't hard. It's just to get them to engage with each other. And so I really liked the way they approached the first one. So the first one was just creating a Bitmoji, because I encourage them, if they're not going to use their camera, to have a Bitmoji rather than a blank screen. And they were so fun, right? Like, so here, every student in my section posted something and said wonderful things to introduce themselves. And we continue to do this each week with some questions like, what are you afraid of for this time? Or what are you interested in? Or, so that's another way that I think our students have been connected. Like because I was teaching the quantum mechanics part of the class, which I know that just scares them. So I was like, okay, we're teaching quantum mechanics. How do you feel about it? And I had a little thing that was like, and I wrote, I'm so excited, I love this stuff. And other kids had the most hilarious, I'm nervous, I'm terrified, I'm excited, but oh no. And it was really cute. So I think that that's another fun app and we're fortunate, like our dean bought it for the department because the colleges didn't pay for it. So we can all have it now, which is nice.
I'll share, these are all great ideas. I really like the participation self-reflection, and I'm thinking about incorporating that in advanced lab in chemistry. So Bob Oksani and I are co-teaching an advanced chemistry lab class this semester. It's relatively small. It's like 16 students. Something that I wish was working better, but we've tried, is to just give the students editing privileges of the assignment documents. And this is something that Babak kind of, before I joined him in this class in a previous iteration, had done, setting up wiki sites where all the assignments were, and the students could have editing privileges and go through it. And we have a way of tracking changes. So make sure nothing goes too too crazy, but encourage them to add things like clarifications or additional information, or just comment or ask questions right on there. We haven't had a lot of engagement this semester on that, but that was something that I was hesitant about, but it actually has not been, hasn't been abused, I'll say. So I'd encourage people to at least consider that.
I really like that idea. I've already found that we're doing a lot of computational chemistry, and like the names of buttons will change or what they look like. So in the worksheet, it'll quickly become outdated, and they'll find all these little mistakes. And I think that would be really cool if they could just edit it themselves. I really like that idea. All right, well, I guess we can move on to the second half of the presentation, and then we'll have another kind of workshop session, because I really liked hearing what you all are doing. Okay. Oops. Here we go. Okay. So many of you have kind of heard about this already, but just in case you haven't, the book Creating Wicked Students by Paul Hanstedt is really great, and a lot of the kind of ideas I got came from this book, so this would be a great place to learn more. But basically what it's about is that Paul Hanstedt says that if you allow students more choices, right, and freedom to direct their own learning, you can enhance their sense of authority, right? And authority is a big concept in the book. And essentially, it's an important piece that's necessary for thoughtful change. So you can have students that know all of the things, or you can have students that know the things and can use them to make a positive difference in the world. And that's really what we want. And so you really have to make sure that they're getting this authority piece in order to do that. So that's all I'm going to say about this for now, since we've done other workshops on this, but I just really recommend taking a look at this book if you haven't already. Maybe like one example of this is something one of my colleagues, Anna, is doing that I really like. She basically found a bunch of like, I don't know, 100 or something, pop science articles, and had each student choose one to present at the end of class. Each day. So at the end of class, one student will present on their article that they chose, and they're on things like the safety of hand sanitizer, or I think there was one on like platypus, and so they're just like random things that are sort of related to science, maybe very tangentially related to organic chemistry. But they kind of get a chance to like be the expert on something, and the other students will ask them questions about it. And it's just kind of a fun community building and authority building activity. Kind of a bigger way that I was doing this in the spring was that, and I've talked about this before too, so I'm going to be brief. In the organic chemistry majors lab that I do, I have them do a proposal where they design their own synthesis, come up with the full proposal for it, and then actually carry out the research project themselves. And I think just a great way for them to build authority, because they get to come up with their own idea and then perform the research and become the expert on their own work, right? But then, of course, this all got upended when halfway through, right, we had to suddenly go remote. And so I had no idea what to do, because my entire plan was having them do their own lab work, right? And that wasn't possible anymore. So I had to come up with something else. So I decided to leave it up to them. I just brainstormed every single thing that I could think of that we could possibly do and put it into a poll. This is just a SurveyMonkey poll. Sent it to the students in the lab and had them pick what they wanted to talk about and what they wanted to do. I still did carry out the projects because I wanted them to see how their proposals turned out. So I carried out the research myself and sent them the results. And we had little meetings if there were things that came up, so they could tell me how they wanted me to proceed if there were different, unexpected things that came up. But for the most part, we were working on something completely new. They ended up choosing guest speakers from various chemistry careers. And since these were all majors, that actually turned out so well. I chose all speakers who were like 1 or 2 years out of college and who were already like in jobs right in their field. I think I had one person who was working at Land O'Lakes doing yeah, she was working on like pesticides and stuff like that. Then I had one person who was doing research and with like a fellowship, getting ready to apply to grad school. And who was my third speaker? Yeah, someone else in a different chemical industry. And basically they were all awesome. The students loved seeing these guest speakers who are all like, right, graduated from the Claremont colleges and working in science. We did the Friedel-Crafts reaction, which was something I developed earlier, so that was pretty easy to do, and they liked that. They did a writing workshop, which actually was awesome and helped me plan the writing activities that I'm doing this fall. And then they chose to hear about my thesis work, which I basically did a little bit of that, and then I mostly turned it into like, here's what grad school is like, and if y'all are interested in grad school, you can totally do it, and here's more information about that. And so then we got to the end of the semester, and basically what they were supposed to do was, originally they're supposed to present on their projects, right? The projects that now they didn't actually do. So I felt like that was a little unfair to make them present on projects that they no longer had that authority piece, because they weren't the expert anymore, because now I did the work, so now I was the expert. And I also kind of thinking back to the previous times I've done it, even in cases where they did do their own work, if the project didn't turn out to have like positive results, or if it wasn't promising, they were kind of nervous about it, and they weren't as excited to present as the students who had promising results. And also, I thought the assignment was great for like giving them communication skills and like talking about science, but they didn't actually learn any new chemistry by doing it, right? Because it was all stuff that they'd already learned. So I gave them the option to pick a new topic if they wanted to. So one person did choose to present on their project proposal that I had carried out. And of course, it was the person whose project turned out really well, right? But the other 3 picked new topics, and they were all really excited about their new topics. And it was super fun to learn about what they chose. And plus, they also had to learn new chemistry in order to talk about these new topics, right? So like one of them was on the chemistry of composting, which I didn't know that much about, but there's a lot of chemistry behind it. And they had to learn all that and present it, and it was something they were passionate about, right? Another person chose like the textile industry, so they talked about organic molecules and dyes, and like the pollution that comes from the textile industry, and the greener approaches that the field like is going in potentially. And it was like way more fun for me because I got to learn so much more, and it was way more fun for them because they were actually really passionate about the topics. So I think I'm going to continue to do this even when we are back in person and they can do their own projects. So that's basically what I have. So that was all spring stuff. But I would love to hear more from all of you. Maybe ways that you promote student authority in your courses, whether you allow your students to make decisions about course topics. I hadn't done that prior to last spring when I think it was kind of forced to. Something I haven't done, but I'm really interested in, is whether anyone gives their students options regarding the format of assignments, and whether there's just like opportunities to give your students more choices in other ways or in any way.
I'll share. So in advanced lab, I think we've done some like little baby steps of giving students more authority and choice, but mostly around things like in a lab where they're going to look at a mass spectrometry database and do some metabolomics data analysis, they choose the class of compounds that they want to work on and what application's most interesting to them. They did an at-home chromatography lab, and they could find things at home that they thought were interesting to them. So the actual tasks that they're doing, we're not giving them much choice on, and I'm interested in trying that out. But the kind of the starting materials they have choice on, and the motivation.
That's great. I love that. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, I teach an environmental chemistry class this semester, and that one, because we don't have to cover certain topics, it is a little bit more free. And so there's certain topics I think students need to know about, like climate change and air pollution and water pollution. But other than that, I let them choose what we're going to cover in the class, which topics. And to give them more authority, we're actually working on a project this semester with a university in Bangkok, Thailand. And they're taking water samples and air samples for us, or well, for the class. And my students are going to work with their students together to analyze the data and then present it to the city of Bangkok to try to revitalize these canals that are there. So I think like that's giving them a little bit more authority, because they're going to know a lot more about this data than I do. And it's a little scary too, to give them that authority, because you're trusting that they're doing with the data what they need to be doing too. So.
Yeah, it totally is scary.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah, just like it is scary, but like for me, it's always been worth it.
Yeah.
I feel like you should share what you did last year or the year before when they traveled to Malaysia. And
yeah, that was kind of the plan with this one, except for it's not going to work to travel, I think. But with EnviroLab Asia, which is part of the Claremont colleges, we worked with a group in Malaysia, our class, looking at renewable energy in Malaysia versus the United States. And it was more like they did some policy and some chemistry. And at the end of the semester, the projects were really cool. So I brought about 5 of my students with me to Malaysia to have a symposium with the students at the university. And one of the papers is hopefully going to be published at some point. We start off with 5 and then it's dwindled down. We have 1 that's still in the running, but it was a really great experience, especially for science students, because sometimes they can't study abroad. They don't have the time to do that. And so at least have the opportunity to go there for 10 days would be good. And I wanted to take them to Bangkok this summer. I just don't think that's gonna happen, probably.
In my biochemistry class, I changed it up a little bit because of reading Paul Hanstedt. So I have always required a project at the end on something in metabolism or something with an enzyme where they kind of put together everything they've done before, and they work in groups. And so this last time I made it much more open, right? I didn't say like, hey, pick a topic in metabolism and do blah, blah. This time I was like, pick any topic that synthesizes the things that we've done and choose any way you want to present it, but it needs to have an active learning component, because I don't lecture in that class. I do all activities. And it was phenomenal. Even though we were online, which, stunk, they had a much broader topic list that was stuff, so I got to learn new things instead of like, oh, I want to study NutraSweet or the keto diet, which is what always comes up. And then their presentations, they did them, they basically filmed themselves in Zoom doing things, but like one group was doing a Zoom thing and then stopped and had a quiz in the middle. Even though we were watching it asynchronously, they set up an asynchronous Kahoot, which is where I learned that you could do that. I didn't even know that was possible. Another group had, they did kind of a play, right? So they acted out, because we had acted out membranes at the beginning of the semester. So they acted out this whole process and showed where the substrates went. And it was just so much more fun. And I think because they were online, if they were just gonna be like, I'm gonna do the PowerPoint that we always do, they would have been more stressed out and less engaged. But because they did really fun things, and one group had homework for us, like we had to, I can't remember what, it was coffee. They wanted to find out, like, there are people who actually are really affected by coffee and people who aren't. So they had a homework for us to do, and to drink coffee and take, a certain amount of time and take your blood pressure. And they had a Google Doc that they put in, and they showed us the data and said, oh yeah, you can tell if you are susceptible or not. And that, of course, was everybody's favorite, and everybody did it and had their brothers and their parents and so we had all this data about the coffee effect. And so I think that like, yeah, because of reading Paul Hansett, I was like, okay, I'm just going to throw it out there and be like, use biochemistry, please. And they did, and they took it really seriously and they loved it. And students, because it was that weird semester, I was like, please go look at other people's stuff. But I didn't necessarily make them reflect or write anything. So they may not have, and they totally did, right? They absolutely did, which I thought was great.
That is so cool. And I really love that they all had to do active learning stuff, because they probably all learned more from each other that way too, in addition to what they learned, like creating their own. That's awesome. I love that.
In our second semester organic lab, usually the second half of that semester is students doing their own project. And they often can choose kind of whatever random thing. And then we got to figure out, can we buy these chemicals and is it not illegal or explosive or whatever kind of thing. Those are like, there are certain parameters that they're not okay. But we found that actually the most successful of these actually are ones that build off of somebody's research program. So if they find a professor and say, what molecule do you want? Could I make some variation or whatever for the class? Because then it's like the product has a purpose as opposed to just being a random derivative of caffeine or whatever, which is fine, but then you end up throwing it away at the end. And so that's typically worked pretty well for us. But again, there are students where it doesn't work and it's sad, but they at least learn new mechanisms typically, or there's something that they can do with it or propose where it might go in the future. And some students do carry them on. Some end up publishing this stuff eventually. Even just, half a semester ends up spinning into a research project. So that sometimes can be cool. One other small thing related to what, like choice of how to deliver something. In my advanced synthesis half course, which I haven't taught for a while now, but when I do, students often can choose, in writing assignments, whether they want to write it as like a comparison paper or like a dialogue between chemists arguing at a bar, like, so they can like do lots of, or like a memo to a supervisor, like, hey, this is way greener than that one because of this. So the costs are gonna be way down, impact on the environment. So when they have the choice of that they often really run with it, and it's not such a burden if they have that option.
David, you had said that your students found people who were working on projects and then took some derivatives from that. Was that a small amount of students, and how did they find those people? Yeah,
so sometimes I would go around and say, hey, hey faculty, or any of you want some molecules, I can propose those. So often I'll have a candidate list. It's not a limiting list, but it's like, these are ones that either I or some other instructor has some vested interest in these things of seeing if it would work or whatever. And so I usually take some initiative if I want to kind of, sort of seed the crystals, if you will, so to influence the outcomes. But otherwise, some of them are already in research groups. They might talk to their supervisor, in which case it's usually like, all right, you can make this compound for the teaching lab. Everything else you do is for your research project, but you can't just like mix them and like have unfair time, and like it's not cool with everybody else. So you have to like kind of allocate that. But and they'll go around and ask. One of them went ask like, hey, could I develop a new experiment for a vanillin lab experiment for FreshChem? Could I use an enzyme in that instead of the chlorination or whatever we're doing? And that particular professor said, no, that experiment sounds too easy. You don't want to, we want something harder. But but they can go around and ask people. That's another way that, then they can build relationships with faculty that way too, and maybe, get something going.
And Dave, so we did that experiment when I was a student, and Sadie too, since you're doing it with the majors lab. And I remember my experiment, I mean, it did not work. And I was just in tears because my organic compound didn't work out. But then in the end, it actually made me really excited about being a chemistry major, because I realized all the problem solving and trying to figure out ways it works. I think it's an amazing experiment. And I think it's amazing you can let them just kind of choose what they want to do, because that's giving them a lot of authority. It's a little bit scary.
It is chaotic as an instructor oftentimes, because all your time is troubleshooting all these different things, and you've got like whatever 10, 12 different students doing totally different things, and you've never done any of it yourself, but I mean, generally you have, but specifically you haven't. So yeah.
I like the way you have that organized, although it's a ton of work on you, because years ago we tried a majors lab sort of like what Sadie's doing, but before we had Sadie, and it was the faculty had to propose a synthesis and the students worked on that synthesis, but it landed on the faculty who proposed the synthesis. There wasn't the parameter of you need to do this in class and it needs to be this time. So some of the projects took a really long time, and it took a lot of time from those of us who came up with projects. And so it wasn't as long-lived because people were like, whoa, I can't also teach OChem, run my own lab, and even if they were making things for us. So it sounds like you have some nice parameters around there. Like I like what Sadie does too, where it's like, here's the thing and you change something, but you don't all do something different, because maybe that makes it a little less crazy for her than it is for you, but you know, more power to all of you for doing it.
It is easier when the times are kind of constrained. I'm not saying this always works out, but if you've got to like set something up, work it out the next day, which is not your lab day, but you know, so if you just do minimal out of normal lab time stuff, that works best. But when it really stretches into a bunch, then it is awkward, and you need to have somebody around for safety reasons and stuff. Yeah.
I make them do time management in their proposal too. Like here's the day-by-day breakdown of what I'm doing on what day, so that they actually set themselves realistic expectations and make sure that they're using their time efficiently. I was wondering, David, for that assignment that you did where you let them choose various formats for the writing assignment, did you like give them ideas for those, or did they come up with all those on their own?
I did give them some ideas, and it came from some in my you know, campus office. I have the book that I got some of these ideas from, which can't recall exactly what it is. It was from some. It was I think before the CTL existed per se, but it was from something akin to that. It's some book that I was reading, some kind of workbook. But I kind of said, here are some options. You can do a simple comparison paper. You could do like the memo to your boss. You could do like the, you know, the two people just shooting BS in a bar about their projects and who's got the better synthesis or whatever kind of thing. So I did seed it, but they weren't limiting examples.
Right.
Yeah.
Very cool.
I also wanted to follow up on the, I like the time management as part of a proposal, something that I didn't realize, and maybe a lot of us are realizing that we're unintentionally giving more work this semester. That we found in a student survey is students don't have the parameters of a lab period that ends at 5:15 to tell them it's time to stop the experimental work, and whatever you got, you're just going to have to run with and kind of talk about the results that you actually got. Whereas there's some students who will just keep tinkering and tinkering and tinkering. And we want to encourage that to an extent, but also provide some boundaries. So I think we are going to, yeah, in our pre-lab instructions, tell them to also take time management and make a proposal around that. But it wasn't something that was really on my radar until this week, that's a real danger for some students this semester.
Yes, Sadie, in relationship to what you just said, Ethan, is there a way that you found that you were able to model that time management piece in what you were asking them to do, that then they knew how to manage their own time? Or how did you give them guidance on managing their own time and setting that plan?
Yeah, I gave them an example. So, you know, here's a possible proposal, and you know, like yours could actually even be very similar to this one if you wanted. And here's kind of a day-by-day breakdown. Actually, I maybe even gave them more than one. I think I gave them 3 examples of like 3 very different ones, so they could kind of see, okay, here's how much is realistic to accomplish in 4 hours. And here's how many days I have, and so this is what I have to limit myself to. With the expectation, right? Like you have to be flexible, because in research things do not always go according to plan, and like you could get derailed in the very first 10 minutes and never get back on track, and that's okay.
I have a selfish hope. I really like Dave's thing about how they write up their papers, and you know, we in Gen Chem have used that. What is it? The Claremont Chemistry Consultants. We created our own company, and the students do an experiment, and their writing is writing to the company with the results, right? So there's something a little bit less formal, a little bit different, and you know, how do you articulate that? And I kind of love the idea of having them expand upon that. Like if in OChem they could do some of these other types, and then in advanced lab, that's where they learn the formal report kind of thing that looks like the publication, right? It could help us think about our writing and all the different ways that they can do that. I don't know, but I was thinking like, wow, there's a lot of pieces here that across the curriculum we could do some really great work instead of all of us doing everything every semester.
Yeah, that would be awesome if we could coordinate it a little more so that it builds on each other. I like that idea.
We'll talk. Are there any other comments or questions, suggestions, sharing? Well, then I want to take this moment for all of us to thank Sadie for the amazing stuff she's doing, because her students are super blessed, but also her willingness to take time and share when we're all this busy. So thank you so much, Sadie. We really, really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh yeah, yeah, of course. And thank you all for your participation too. I really enjoyed hearing what you all are working on and got some really good ideas. So thank you.
Jessica, do you want to announce any other CTL events?
Yes, upcoming this Thursday evening, 4:30ish. As some people I know have faculty meetings, but we're just going to have an open hour of kind of happy hour time for anybody who wants to drop in whenever you want, have side conversations. You can disappear into a breakout room if you want to talk to somebody. But just to sort of give people a little break from these first couple weeks and get some downtime, some less formal kind of collaboration and connection time. I know we're all missing that. So that's 4:30. And if you want the Zoom link to that, just email me if you don't have it already. And then on Friday, this Friday, the 25th, from 1 to 3, Nick Daly, who was the Associate Dean of the Office of Black Student Affairs, is going to be giving a workshop on creating sort of more anti-racist pedagogies and classroom practices, and so really focusing on an inclusive classroom model. So you can still RSVP for that event. We're trying to shut down RSVPs about 24 hours before the event, just so that we're not still like scrambling to get the link to everybody up till the last minute. And that's on our website if you want to RSVP for that event. And Nick has been very gracious. Like he's going to be doing all kinds of things related to very specific disciplinary and cross-disciplinary practices that you might include in your classes to encourage inclusive participation.
And Jessica, if I can add, this is more scripts, but we're doing every Friday faculty refresh from 10 to 11:30, and anyone's welcome to join. Will be sometimes we might have a specific topic or speaker. I'm hoping that the educational representative from SLAC might come and kind of do something, but they're really thought of as like little work sprints where people can pop in, pop out, and if nobody shows up, we're going to be like jamming on Canvas and Sakai and things like that. So please let me know.
Thank you so much, Sadie. We really, really appreciate this. It was just fantastic. Good stuff. I took some screenshots that I'm going to tweet about. I hope that's okay.
Yeah, is it okay if we do share and say how great it was?
I hope so.
If that's I mean, I'm gonna, because it was awesome.
Do you have a social media handle, Sadie, that we could tag you?
Yeah, I guess I can put my Twitter in the chat. Let me figure out what it is. I think I know what it is. Yeah.
That's so cool. All right, well, thank you everybody for being here. Thank you, Sadie, for the awesome presentation and time for us to reflect together. And I hope your week goes well, everyone.
Thanks, Sadie.